Hello and welcome to the Jacob and Coffee Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about all things real estate over a great cup of coffee. I'm your host today, Jacob Schuler, and today we're going to be talking about should I buy or should I rent? Now, before we get into this, I do want to say a big thank you to Ridge Coffee Company for sponsoring today's show. Ridge Coffee Company is based out of Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, and they have handcrafted drinks that everyone is sure to love. If you want to find out more about them, check out their Facebook page, or you could shoot them an email at ridgecoffeeco@gmail.com. That's ridgecoffeeco@gmail.com. Also, be sure to check out their new location coming to the Bono, Arkansas area. So, should I buy or should I rent? Let's get into it. Before we start, I want to make one thing clear. I do not give professional advice. If you want professional advice, I want to encourage you to go find someone who does. Because I don't want anything that I say to come back and bite me. If you want to seek professional advice, it does not come from me. I am not an expert. You know, my dad always said when I was growing up, expert is broken down into two parts, expert. So that would mean a former drip under pressure. I am not an expert. You should seek out an expert. So the question, should I rent or should I buy? I'm pretty sure we've all thought about this at least one point in life. If you're an adult and you have moved out of your parents' house and you are forced to make a decision of where you're going to live, you're out on your own, you have thought about this. Well, do I rent a place or do I buy a place? Most people first rent. But it's almost the American dream to be a homeowner. In fact, I would say that is one of the beauties of this country is the dream of home ownership. So we might come to a crossroads in our mind, in our decision-making, thinking, should I rent or should I buy at this time? So like I said, even though I can't give you advice, I can give you some things that you might want to think about that may help you make a more educated or better decision. So one thing that people think about in considering home ownership is going to be their interest rate. And I know that interest rates are kind of a hot topic right now. It's on everyone's mind. Fed has raised rates. They're scheduled to meet a couple more times just this year, and you can only listen to speculation as to where they will go. I have personally heard that rates could go up to as high as 7 or 8% this year. Now, we may think, especially coming out of the COVID era real estate, we may think, but my friend just secured a mortgage at 2.5%. 7 and 8% would be outlandish. Really, though, 7 and 8% is still lower than the national the historical average of mortgage rates in this country. I know that even now, most people that I'm hearing, they're getting to lock in at 5.25. Sometimes, I actually have heard of some at 4.5 to 5.25. My first house I bought was 4.9%. So I am not too worried about interest rates. The only people I think who benefited from the craze, the real estate craze, were people who needed to unload some portfolio because they had massive amounts of equity, and that they could now sell off and get a pretty high return. But if you were a homeowner that was moving during the COVID craze, your home may have sold for a super high price comparatively to what it was worth 5 years ago. But you then had to move into something. Yes, you got a stellar interest rate, but you were paying $50,000-$60,000 over what that home was worth just a few years ago. So there are checks and balances throughout the market that are going to determine whether or not you're getting a crazy stellar deal or not. And I think, like I said, most people who got the crazy stellar deals were the investors who were unloading portfolios. But interest rates do play a part in our decision making, and yes, they are higher than what they were a couple years ago. They are higher than what they were just a year ago. But I don't think that is too huge. What this does, though, it will raise your monthly payment. That's the kicker. But here's the thing: your monthly payment a year ago would have got you more house, but it sets some unrealistic expectations. People who could not have afforded a $250,000, $300,000 home now could. Like if they were below that, if they were at the 150,000 mark a year ago, maybe they could have pushed their income to afford a $200,000 home. But normally that wouldn't have been the case. So it's crazy how humans can get so used to something so fast that when it kind of corrects itself and reverts back, they begin to freak out and say, well, I'm not going to be able to afford the house. Well, you really weren't going to be able to enjoy that standard of living anyways. This was kind of an anomaly. So yes, your payment is going to be higher if you shoot for that more expensive house. But if you align your goals and you align, well, your purchasing power where it would have been had this weird market not happened, you're really not far off from where you would have been anyways. So I think that's important for us to remember, is to align our expectations with where our what are more realistic to our situation. So, and if you want to, if you're afraid that interest rates are going to continue to climb until it reaches like something like the 80s, which, I mean, good grief, the 80s it got up to like 16%. We're not seeing that right now. You can thank your lucky stars, but if you are worried about that kind of thing happening, you could always lock in your rate now. Or if you're thinking, well, I want to wait a little bit and maybe these rates will go down, but you found a house that you really would love to have, you could definitely get like a 5 or 7 year ARM. Now, if you don't know what that is, I want to encourage you to watch my video about loans. But you could get a 5 or 7 year ARM, and then when that loan matures, you could go ahead and just refinance at a lower rate, whatever the lower rate is. It's really, I mean, if we all had a way to see the future, you wouldn't have to take this advice for these what if scenarios. You would be able to go ahead and make educated decisions based on what is going to happen. But guess what? We don't have any kind of way to see the future. We can guess and estimate what the market will do based on history, but there's absolutely no way to be sure of anything in this market. So there's one thing to consider about interest rates. Another thing to consider is, how long are you going to be there? How long do you plan on being in the area where you are? So I know of some people who move for jobs. They move to take a new position. I know one fella who moved to Phoenix to start working at Boeing, and he moved from Washington State. So how long do you plan on being in the area is going to also be a determining factor, because here's why. There are other fees associated with loans that aren't just based on your interest rate. There are loan origination fees and such. So if you only plan on being somewhere for a couple years, it might be more advantageous for you to go ahead and just rent. Now, I know that there are some people, and I've heard this my whole life, renting is like pouring money down a rabbit hole. But honestly, most people in the country, most people in life are going to have to pay for where they live. So unless you're just dumping massive amounts of cash into your home to build equity, you're probably just going to pay the payment to live there. So renting is really not that different if you only plan on being there for a certain amount of time, because you're not going to realize that equity for a short amount of time. In fact, the loan origination fees, when they spread over, say you live somewhere for 2 years, those fees, if you spread the cost of those fees coupled with the price of your monthly payment over those 2 years, it might actually be more expensive than it would be to just rent somewhere where all you have is a refundable deposit, and you stay there for a couple years, and you move back out, you get that refundable deposit back. I mean, if you were a good tenant, that is, you'd be able to get that back. So how long are you going to stay somewhere is also a good thing to think about when you're going over this in your mind of whether you should rent or whether you should buy. So what if you're also in the place of you're renting right now? Should you go ahead and buy, or should you just wait and ride this out? Because housing prices are continuing to rise, rents are predicted to rise as well. Also, we're in massive inflation. So that the cost of everything is going up. We would be foolish to think that because we have had a monthly payment that has been the same for the last 5 years, even if you're lucky enough to have that it would be for another 5-10 years at that same dollar amount. What's going to happen is these landlords are going to start realizing, and I'm not saying like the light bulb's going to go off, like there's going to be an actual an effect to their finances because of inflation. Everything's going to be more money for them. Utilities, cost of labor for when they hire the contractors out to come in and fix things when windows might be broken, when AC units go out, when dishwashers quit working, fridges quit working, garbage disposals quit working. Services like that are going to increase as well. They're going to have to make that money somewhere. So that cost is going to be passed down to the renter. So that's something that you're going to have to think about. If you're renting right now and you're thinking, well, I may want to wait a little bit longer before I decide to pull the trigger. Like I said, home prices are still predicted to rise. So waiting is not going to get you any better deal right now, since the home prices are still going up. If you wait, you might end up paying a higher price at a higher percentage on your mortgage. So it's one thing to think about, and now don't feel pressured into buying, but I'm letting you know that this is a very real possibility. There are some areas that have rent caps, but there are other areas that don't, and it's just going to have to go to what the market demands in that area. So if you're renting right now and you have already thought about buying, but maybe your hold up is, well, I just want to wait and see what this does, you might consider buying. Also, I want you to think about if you purchase on a long-term fixed loan, then your rent, your payment, is going to be the same. If you get on a 30-year fixed, your payment's not going to change. I mean, you can refinance, stuff like that. But if you get on a 30-year fixed loan, your payment's going to be the same. And it is not going to adjust. It's just going to be the cost of the house plus it's the interest and the insurance. If it's below 20% down payment, you're going to be spread across that entire life of the loan. So that payment is going to be the same every month until it's paid off. So that housing cost isn't going to go up. So that might be something you want to think about. If you're thinking you'd like to lock in some kind of payment you can afford, and you find a house that fits within those parameters, it wouldn't be a bad idea, honestly, to go ahead and pull the trigger on something, because real estate is one of those cool things to where it appreciates over time, because they don't make any more of it. They're not producing dirt anymore. I mean, God said, and there was the earth, but I mean, they don't just manufacture dirt anymore. They don't manufacture real estate. So, since they're not making any more of it, it's scarce. That's one of the beauties of it. It appreciates over time. So you might want to consider go ahead and locking in some form of dwelling in a house. Another thing that you want to consider in renting versus buying is, how handy are you, or do you know someone who is handy? Because when you are renting, like I said earlier, your AC goes out, your dishwasher goes out, your fridge goes out. The landlord puts that in. I mean, they take care of that. When you are a homeowner and you got a leaky roof, you know whose responsibility that is? That's you. You are the one who's supposed to fix that thing now. So the cost of hiring a contractor, or if you want to tackle it yourself, that all falls on you. And now that may not faze you. It certainly didn't faze me. The first house I bought, man, I thought I could conquer the world. I thought, I don't care what this house is doing. I'm going to fix everything in this house. Now, there's a certain humbling that was associated with that experience. If you'd love to hear more about it, just shoot me a message and we'll talk. But I wasn't scared about that. But there are some people who just aren't handy. And that may be something you want to consider. But again, it's always a catch-22. You end up paying the cost. You have a lower mortgage payment. You end up paying the cost of fixing these things when they go wrong. And Murphy's Law says if it can't go wrong, it will. So you either pay a higher rent and have the landlord take care of these things, or you pay a lower mortgage payment and you take care of these things. Something to consider. If you have any more scenarios or maybe even more questions about, hey, do you think I should rent or I should buy in this scenario, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to talk with you about it. Also, I want to encourage you to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Also, if you're watching this, subscribe on YouTube, hit that notification bell, and leave a great comment for us. We are always looking forward to hearing from you. And until next time, I want to encourage you all to live life one cup at a time.